Hello and welcome once again to the Small Bear Show. I'm your host, Alex S. Johnson, aka Small Bear, and I'm the an author, editor, publisher of Nocturnicorn Books. And we're a boutique literary imprint. We put out bizarro fiction, erotica, noir, kind of multi-genre hybrids. We publish literary and literal rock stars, including Jarbo from Swans, David J. Haskins from Bauhaus and Love and Rockets, Poppy Z. Bright, now Billy Martin, Caitlin R. Kiernan, John Shirley, and our very special guest today is none other than Maxim Jakubowski. Maxime began his career remarkably at the age of 16. He was educated in France and he wrote his first novel which was published in French. And it's never been published in English so far at the age of 16. And he is the past president of the Crime Writers Association, the recipient in 2019 of the Red Herring Award, the Lifetime Achievement Red Herring Award from Crime Writers Association. He has been an editor, has worked as an editor, including working with such iconic names as Peter Aykroyd, William Golding, Michael Moorcock, Jim Thompson, David Gittes, and many more. He's been a columnist for The Guardian newspaper, and he ran the Murder One bookshop in, is it London? Is
It was in central London, yeah.
in central London for more than 20 years. The Times of UK, it's just called The Times for people who aren't in the UK, called Maxime the king of the erotic thriller. And also on your website, Maxime, you say that your erotica is has been deemed controversial. So I would like to explore that. It's also the editor of the a quite an astonishing number of anthologies. And most recently, he put out a book of it's a kind of a tribute to Hitchcock. So I want to talk about that a little bit. He is the since 2024 has been the editor at large for Bedford Square Publishers No Exit Press. So welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. So I'd like to so one of the our connections is that and the reason we're talking the occasion that we're talking is the publication of the director's cut of The Junk Merchants, a literary tribute to William S. Burroughs. And actually it was your story. I don't even know how to describe it other than a sort of gonzo autofiction story called Olympia Express, which formed the kernel around which this mammoth, nearly 800-page monster. I'm not going to take it out from my, shelf because Clive Barker and Lemmy Kilmister and Pinhead are going to fall on me. So I know already that's going to happen. But so the Junk Merchants is a kind of a is a it's a multi-genre homage to William S. Burroughs, and it features original work by Carrie Lee Chrome, the co-founder of the band The Runaways, with Joan Jett, David J. Haskins, the songwriter of, among other many classic songs, including Bela Lugosi's Dead for Bauhaus, and Love and Rockets, worked with Love and Rockets, and is a solo performer. We have, I mentioned Jarbo, Ethan Maroulis from Spawn Ranch, and Black Tape for a Blue Girl, and on and on and on. Caitlin R. Kiernan, etc. The foreword for the original Junk Merchants was written by none other than Graham Masterton, the author of course, The Manitou and Rules of Duel with William S. Burroughs himself. And the more recent forward for the sort of second edition or definitive edition, I should say, was Larry Jaffe, who's the National Beat Poet Laureate and co-founder of Poets for Peace. And the introduction was written by Billy Martin, also known as Poppy Zebright, to his many, many, many fans worldwide. And it's a great privilege to be able to work with so many outstanding, authors in their own fields, as well as being able to show that Burroughs' influence was not just in one field, right? I mean, his influence on art, on writing, on music, on culture was so enormous. And so we're going to get back into that. Mr. Jakubowski most recently has published the third in a trilogy of books and featuring the same main character. And the most recent book, which we're going to be talking about today, is called Manhattan Murder Ballad. When you sent me that email, I thought at first it was Manhattan Murder Ballad, and I was thinking, what sort of right?
It has it has been on occasion when I'm typing because of the damn autocorrect software, which has been. I mean, I've managed to catch it every time, but it's definitely a ballad rather than Jim Ballard.
Yes, fascinating, fascinating. So I'd like to start out by talking about you. You were kind of like Ramsey Campbell and like I'm trying to think of the name of that the British philosopher who Colin is it
Colin
Colin
Will.
Colin Wilson, who also came to fame at a very young age. And so Mr. Jakubowski published his first novel in France. It was in French. And what was the title of this book?
It was called Loin de Terra, which translates as Far from Earth. And
Far
it was
from.
basically a space opera. I'll correct you slightly. It was written when I was 16 and published at 17, but
Oh, published at 17. Yeah. I believe Ramsey Campbell
every
published.
year, at my age now, every year counts.
Right, yes. I was just thinking that Ramsey Campbell published The Inhabitants of the Lake when he was like 15 or 16, right? And with Arkham House. So the very similar kind of trajectory with you and Ramsey. And so who were I know that you and Michael Moorcock and uh, uh, just, I mean, that's the first name that comes to mind, Michael Moorcock, huge inspiration for me and many, many people. We're close friends, are close friends. You worked with J.G. Ballard, but that is to anticipate. Who were initially your biggest inspirations and influences in science fiction and fantasy?
Well, basically, as you mentioned, I was brought up in France because my parents went to live in France when I was only 3 years old. And when you're 3 years old, you have little choice in the matter. So I obviously learnt French when I was enrolled into what in America you would call kindergarten. Obviously, all the little French kids would quickly gang up on me because I was a little English boy, despite the Polish name, because my father was Polish and my mother was English. And the little French kids would gang up on me. So I learned very quickly that I had to learn French. And I did learn French, obviously, by virtue of going to school there. And it's since proven very convenient because obviously I am, as a result, bilingual. And obviously, if in the company of French people who don't know in much about me, they wouldn't have a clue I am English, which means you become like an interloper at the party. People might say things they wouldn't say had they known, but but I've always been a bit outside. I mean, a lot of people. I mean, when I came back to the UK from France and actually did a science fiction fanzine, a lot of people assumed I was French
Wow.
because I spent so little time. in England, the only time I spent in England was basically school or university holidays, during which time, obviously, and I had one whole year when I actually met Mike Moorcock and many others, as I was very active in London science fiction fandom. But said I've seen it referred even in fan history books that I was French, but
Mhm.
I happened to live and to go to school in France, but there was nothing French about me. However, my sister, who is much, much younger than me, was born when we were living in France and has a French passport. But of course, she left when she was only 1 year old and still has a French passport, but doesn't speak a word of French.
Wow, interesting, fascinating. So being by when did you learn French?
Well, at school,
At school, right?
I've never been to school in England apart from my after my mother died. No, after my mother fell badly ill, the family came back to England, and I still had 1 year of my French secondary schooling curriculum to complete. So I was enrolled in the French lycée in London.
Hmm.
That's the only time I've been to school in England. But of course, it was a French lycée, and everything was in French.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, I was in the same class as the person who became my best friend because we then went back to Paris together and shared an apartment for 9 years.
Wow.
He followed a French writer called Tony Cartano, who
Hmm.
followed an almost identical path to mine, even though I never went into teaching. I went straight into business and publishing. He was for several years a teacher and then went into publishing and became one of the big names in French publishing. And also in the same class, we had the Anglo-French actress Jacqueline Bisset,
Oh wow. Yeah.
who was utterly beautiful, but of course, nerds like Tony and me were never spoken to for that. And also another person who then became later very famous in France as a he was from Brittany and he was a harp player. I mean, he changed his name to Alan Stivell, but he is still very well known in France. So it was an interesting year.
Yeah. Wow.
So,
I would say. Yeah. Now you wrote your first novel in French or
well,
English?
basically, I mean, I was until my sister was born, but I was only 13.
Hmm.
I was basically an only child, and I would spend my life basically. I used to spend my life reading. I loved books, and it being France, obviously, I was initially a major science fiction and fantasy fan. So obviously, I was brought up on Jules Verne and started collecting, and then found out about modern science fiction. Obviously, read intensely. I mean, I was reading. During my pre-teens and teens, I was reading 4 or 5 books a week, and I was already becoming involved in fandom. I started by writing a letter to the readers' column of a French science fiction magazine, which they published, and of course misspelled my name, which obviously happens very often.
Yeah.
And but that encouraged me. So a few weeks later, on my day off from school, I dropped in. I must have been about 14 or 15, I can't remember. I dropped in at the office of the magazine and volunteered myself as a translator because obviously I was bilingual. So they they gave me a test, and I was then over a few months I translated half a dozen short stories which the magazine had licensed from US publications,
Hmm.
stories Clifford D. Seamack, Philip K. Dick.
Oh wow.
And then I started like every Thursday, which is obviously the day in the middle of the week which you have off, or which you had off in France in those days. I would haunt the magazine offices, and eventually I started meeting the authors, and I found out that the authors were paid 3 times more than the translators. So I thought maybe I will start, and I started writing.
Yeah.
Uh, and on the basis of a couple of short stories, which I think were probably published just to get me out of the way. Very short stories, totally forgettable. I then had the audacity to contact the most prestigious science fiction imprint in French publishing, offering my services and with an outline, and they said, "Yeah, go ahead." So I got my first contract. The amusing thing is that, of course, I was a minor, so
Uh-huh.
I couldn't cash the advance check.
Oh, wow.
My father also had the same initials, MJ.
Oh,
So
wow.
can you make the check out to M. Jakubowski so I could cash the
Nice.
check through my father's account?
Yeah.
I mean, my father never quite understood what was going on. I mean, my father was a man of action and only read a whole book in his whole life, and even then, I'm not even sure whether he was telling the truth. My mother was much more intellectual and also wrote and was a journalist. And the book was published. It's absolutely terrible. It's long, long out of print. It will never be republished, slated,
Yeah.
basically. And if I find a copy, I basically destroy them.
Right? Okay. So, wow. That's must have been bad. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
to put things in perspective, I might have been 17 when it was published, but I then didn't have a single word published for another 8 or 9 years after that.
What did you learn? Because I had a similar experience. I did I wrote a canonical book in the Jason X Friday the 13th spin-off novel with Pat Cadigan. But I learned a lot from writing an absolutely horrifically bad novel. And so I'm kind of curious, in that 8 or 9 years until you were published again, what were some of the lessons that you learned from writing a bad book, by your own account, a bad book?
Well, that's the problem. The reason I wasn't published for another 8 or 9 years is that I didn't learn the lessons. Uh,
Oh, okay.
I, th I thought having published a highly minor space opera science fiction book at the age of 17, that I was God's gift to creation, and
Wow.
then set down to write basically, well, it wasn't science fiction, it was the ultimate fantasy book, which would answer, obviously, which would have the answers to all the secrets of creation, creativity, God, and the galaxy,
Wow.
which I probably still have it. I mean, it was. It's still handwritten, but it's probably somewhere in a box somewhere, and obviously never managed to finish it or get it published. And then obviously I grew older and went to and basically grew up. Um, and I continued. Obviously, I was doing reviews. I was doing a lot of reviews of books, of films, of music. I'm an incredible music for me is as important as writing. Even though I can't play an instrument and I can't read music, but music has been an integral part of my life for a number of reasons. But from my early 20s, I mean, I lost my fire, if I can put it that way,
Hmm.
because basically I discovered that there were women until then. I spent probably more time sort of courting women or trying to court women than actually writing. So I had to, because obviously I was catching up. Obviously, 10 years as a nerd teen who was purely into books. So life caught up with me, and obviously, and then I realized that, of course, no, I didn't have the answers. I wasn't God's gift to literature, and I quickly came to the conclusion, even in science fiction, which is why I gradually moved away from the science fiction field, is that I had to admit, and I still do, I haven't got the imagination for science fiction. I mean, I'm fascinated by science, but I mean, I barely passed my final exams because my in maths I scored a big zero, but fortunately in English, French, and philosophy I had 19 or 20 out of 20.
Hmm.
So I I passed, but and I like writing stories. I like writing stories about people. I write love stories, hence coming at a later stage to erotica. But I don't have any messages to impart. I just write stories, and
Yeah,
for the last decades, I've been quite happy doing that. I'm not going to write the great English or the great American science fiction novel or whatever. I'll
right.
just writing my little books as long as I'm happy. And obviously, for several decades now, I've been in the privileged situation whereby I don't have to rely on my writing to make a living. I mean, I worked in public at a certain stage. I went into book publishing, and basically, I was very senior in a number of book publishing companies. I mean, I used to run Virgin, and obviously, because of the music connection, I worked with Virgin. In fact, I was the only Virgin group director who had neither been at school with Richard Branson or was related to him for several years. And I used to run the whole publishing group, which was not just books but also music publishing. So, and obviously, I was involved, sadly, with the Sex Pistols, Mike Oldfield, Can, Tangerine Dream, the Police, because we used to publish their music publishing. We didn't issue the records, and of course the Sex Pistols. And because I was the director at Virgin, who basically was told, "Oh, you deal with those idiots." Uh, I ended up actually after John Beverly, obviously, who was better known as Sid Vicious, died. His mum needed money, obviously, for drugs,
Yeah,
and came to Richard Branson saying, "Oh, I need some money," and there were no royalties forthcoming for John's for the Sid Vicious estate, and Richard came down the stairs and said, "Any ideas what we can do so we can give her some money, but legally,
right. Yeah,
just to get her off our back?" And I don't know how, but I came up with the idea because, well, I met Anne Beverly and went to her house, and she had all these photos of Sid Vicious when he was a kid in his short trousers and in his school blazer. And she had all his school photos over 10 years. And I thought, we'll just publish that. We'll do it as the Sid Vicious family album. And we sold about 30,000 copies. I mean, the biggest non-book ever. Also earned her some money. And of course, 1 year later, obviously, she died of a drug overdose because we knew where the money was going. But I also published, because obviously Mike Moorcock is probably my second oldest friend, and we've known each other since we were 17 and 18, and we've been in contact ever since. I knew Mike needed the money, and Virgin owned the rights to the because Malcolm McLaren, of course, had relinquished all the rights to the great rock and roll swindle movie, and Virgin owned it, and we thought, well, we if we bring it out in the cinemas, we're going to make quite a bit of money first week, but then the word of mouth is going to be so awful because obviously it's shit. That's
right.
basically.
Yeah.
So we need to make as much money in the first week of release as we can. Yes.
Right.
Richard came to me, Richard Branson came to me and said, in book publishing, I mean, he had no interest in books. Richard, it's the art of a deal. I mean, but unlike Trump, Richard is a reasonably nice guy. Um, and he said, in books I've seen people do novelizations of movies. And he said, maybe we can do a novelization of a great rock and roll swindle and bring it out to coincide with the release of the movie in the UK. And I
Oh,
said,
wow.
the movie has no plot. It has. He said, "Oh, you'll think of something." And I knew that Mike Moorcock needed a bit of money every time. So
Yeah.
Mike lived in Ladbroke Grove, just 2, 3 blocks around the corner from the Virgin offices. So I went to Mike and I said, "Mike, we can give you a reasonable advance, but you've got to you've got to novelize it." Gave him it was a DVD, not a DVD, a VHS.
Right.
the film, and he said, "It's got no plot. It's got no." And he wrote The Great Rock and Roll Swindle, which we brought out, we got publication as like a punk newspaper. And then 1 month later, we brought it out as a book. And it was just basically, and Mike, it's still in Mike's bibliography. It's still included in his complete works. I mean, he brought in, obviously, the wonderful character of Jerry Cornelius. So it
Yes,
became a Jerry Cornelius meets the Sex Pistols. Sort of
fascinating.
improvisation. So I don't know how I got onto that, but as I said, music was very important for me. And obviously, having worked with, I spent all those years in Virgin. Obviously, I was running the book side and the music publishing, but we had musicians coming in and out of the building all the time. And obviously, for a couple of years before I married, dated a fairly well-known folk stock folk rock singer. I mean, I knew and still, well, now they've probably forgotten me, but I knew everybody in the business. And most of my evenings, unlike other book publishers who have lived rather staid lives, I was out at concerts or on the road with rock bands, looking at them and carrying the Virgin Group credit card. So it was an interesting life. And it's only halfway through my time at Virgin when I really started writing again seriously. But by
Yeah,
then, I'd abandoned science fiction fantasy because I thought I have no more ideas and started writing sort of thrillers. But I've never written a thriller with a policeman. I've never written a thriller with an investigation. They're sort of personal books, personal thrillers, very noir books. And just found my niche somehow. But as I said, yes, as I said, I've always written without any, unlike when I wear my publisher hat, I'm fairly pragmatic and commercial, obviously, because a publishing house is a commercial enterprise and has to make money, if any because you need 1 or 2 books a year that make money so it can subsidize the publication of the 7 or 8 or others which are not going to make money or barely make any money. So I'm very pragmatic from that point of view, and I've run huge businesses with lots of staff. I mean, I was head of Penguin, the illustrated division of Penguin for several years, and then for the Hearst Corporation after Penguin. So I've run companies. I I might be basically an intellectual, but I've also run businesses.
right. You're right.
I can see both sides, but as I said, as a result, obviously, I owned at one stage, obviously, a percentage of the Virgin Group, and when I departed after one too many disagreements with Richard
Oh, wow.
Van, obviously, I held my shares for some time until the group got even bigger. This was long before, obviously, Virgin Airlines,
Yeah,
and then seem to have this knack that every 10 or 15 years, even though I'm not trying, something falls in my lap,
right.
which basically gives a huge boost to my bank account. Uh, for instance, after I left full-time publishing, sort of just before I opened Murder One, well, I left general book publishing because I was just getting disillusioned. That a lot of the books I enjoyed doing, publishing Jim Thompson, David Goodis, Cornell Woolrich, and even a lot of very good literary authors, basically were not really selling huge quantities. They were getting good reviews, but they weren't selling. And all the non-books that we were publishing, which we had to, I mean, including, it was almost done over my dead body. I mean, for 15 years, all my staff always knew that never get Maxim to sign off on a cat book because I'm not a cat lover, I'm afraid. I hate cats with a vengeance. So
Interesting.
call me imperfect, but that's who I am.
Yeah,
My children have never forgiven me that when they were small, they were never allowed pets.
fascinating. I myself was never allowed pets. I don't know. It's not like my parents hate animals, but it's just it never happens. So Mike Moorcock is very well known as, in multi-genre as well as, being a songwriter for, among other bands, Blue Oyster Cult. As a huge music fan
And Hope.
yourself, yes, yes, and yes. Did you ever try your hand at writing songs?
No,
No.
no.
Okay.
As I said, I mean, I love music, and but I can't write music. I can't play an instrument. Well, probably if the devil knocked at the door tomorrow and gave me a choice of if I wanted to live my life again, what would I do? I would probably come back as a bass player.
Right, really. Why bass?
I don't, I don't know.
Okay, yeah, bass is a fascinating instrument, so I'd like to talk about the erotica. So because you claim that you sort of ran out of ideas or you have a finite number of ideas, but I don't really believe you, sir. I think that, your controversial erotica is quite fascinating. Um, uh, First of all, what makes it controversial? And second of all, how did you get into writing erotica?
Well, even my science fiction, when I was writing science fiction, and later my thrillers, always had sexual elements.
Hmm.
Basically, as I think I mentioned, my main interest is in writing about people, and they have to be credible characters. And basically, human beings, sex is incredibly important. And for me, having sex scenes or basically sexual or sentimental relationships between some of the characters was just a way of making them credible, of making him live. And as a result, obviously, over the years, my literary agents, I've been through a few over the years, like any writer, would always come back saying, "Oh, your editor's is doing the book, but he wasn't too happy about one or two this page or that page, and wanted to see could you tone the sex down because I've never. I mean, I do write explicitly, yeah, and." I would always say no, and they'd say, "Oh, okay." So I really, and then when I started writing thrillers, obviously it was much easier to have sex scenes. Obviously, in science fiction, obviously it's almost a technical challenge,
Right.
done incredibly well by Philip Farmer and a few others.
Yes.
Were part of, obviously, of the Essex House experiment in the 1960s. And I, in fact, discovered the Essex House books, which were so innovative. Obviously, some of them were science fiction, but the majority were not science fiction. And I wrote a major essay for an academic publication on them because a friend of mine, the science fiction writer Ian Watson,
Oh, yes.
uh, had a whole set, and I borrowed it, and I love the books, and it showed me basically what you can do, and that you can write basically literate erotic. You can write literature. I mean, there are books by Michael Perkins or David Meltzer, who are better known as poets, but
Right.
who chance to write erotic books at the time of Essex House, which I feel are absolutely incredible novels, and that was also an inspiration. But as I said, throughout my writing career, I've always had sexual elements in the books, which obviously editors have never been too happy about. And then one day I thought, what the hell? I'll take out the crime, I'll take out the science fiction, I'll just write a book which is called erotica, because I'd been reading so many books that I admired at the time. And I wrote, in fact, it was a novella because I couldn't, it didn't justify extending to novel length. I wrote a novel which was in this was the internet was beginning to come on the scene, and in fact, it was my version. Although when you read it, you probably wouldn't see it. It was my version of a story of about set in on the internet, and
Oh,
it's called The State of Montana, and basically the book. I mean, it's sold in 9 or 10 countries, but it hasn't been a bestseller. It's just been ticking over. It's never sold more than 3 or 4 thousand copies in any given country, although it's still available everywhere because on the cover it says soon to be a major motion picture,
Oh,
because it was bought by Nicole Kidman after Eyes Wide Shut, when she thought she could
oh
take on
wow.
very daring. And of course, 1 year later, and they paid a fortune. I mean, basically, this was 20, over 20 years ago, but I mean, it was my retirement. I didn't need the Virgin money anymore. I could get rid of
Right.
this was my retirement fund because they bought it outright and then decided 1 year later that they didn't want to develop it and came back to my agent saying, "Oh, do you want to buy it back?" And we said, "No, we'll keep the money, thank you."
Right.
And because, of course, in film contracts, basically the film company or the producer who acquires the rights also acquires rights to all the characters. So if you use the same characters in further books, they can use them for free. But that particular book, none of the characters I've ever used again. So that was rather fortunate. And as I said, so as a result, even though that my left-hand side is pragmatic and commercial as a publisher and still is, and my right-hand side basically doesn't give a damn, and I write what I want to write, knowing that I do have a limited audience of sorts. I've got a solid audience, but that I don't have to depend on it on a living.
Right. Yeah.
Not not that I need that much to live on. I mean, I live in a huge house. I have 12 rooms. Every room is full of books. Plus, there's a library at the back of the garden, another library around. I have about 30,000 books. My vice is book and record collecting.
Yes, yes. Sounds familiar. It reminds me of I'm a huge fan of Thomas De Quincey. I just love it. His prose is so, exquisite. And he actually he had a house in the Lake District next to Coleridge, and he filled it up with books, and he had to move into a new house because, bibliophile. Um, so yeah, I totally agree, Maxim, with you as far as erotica being and fully you know, fully available to a literary quality. And I was very excited when our mutual friend Thomas Roche, invited me to participate in the Noir Erotica series, which we were both published in, as well as people like John Shirley, Caitlin R. Kiernan, Poppy Z. Bride, et al. So,
And the only time I met John Shirley is I happened to be in San Francisco with my wife, and um, I can't remember if it was Thomas or Chris Munsey who writes as M. Christian.
oh yes, I'm Christian. I know him well. Yeah,
Organized a dinner, so they were there. Thomas was there, Chris was there, and John Shirley was also there. But it's the
yeah,
only time I met him.
yeah.
Remember, we went to an Italian place where the size of the dishes was absolutely obscene.
It was also my friend Ken Goffman, better known as Are You Serious, was also part of this. It's a really amazing kind of alliances and connections and associations in and around William S. Burroughs, right? I mean, you had, Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails, you had Blondie, you had Burroughs himself, you had Shirley, you had William Gibson, and for a while there, it was just like this incredible powerhouse of, creativity that pretty much was responsible for the cyberpunk genre. Um, which I want to go back to erotica. So I want to talk about like for me some of the best books that I've ever read, for example, Jean de Berg's L'Image, and I think that's formidable classic. For you, what are some literary classics that are explicit erotica?
Well, obviously, all Henry Miller. Obviously, the story of O, the Jean de Berg books, but um, I mean, Leonard Cohen's second novel basically is. I mean, one third of the book is so explicit and beautifully written. This is, can't remember, is it? Yeah, Beautiful Losers.
Yes,
And then you've got, I mean, here and there you've got contemporary writers. I mean, Nicholson Baker's
yes, Fox.
three absolutely beautiful books.
Yeah, yeah,
And Alain Robbe-Grier's last novel was, I mean, absolutely obscene. And as a result, obviously, I mean, they finally got published in the English language 5 or 6 years ago, but we were a very small publisher, so it had no impact whatsoever. And of course, Jeanne de Burgh was Robbe-Grier's wife.
right. Yeah, Catherine.
And
Was it Catherine? Or no, I'm thinking of Catherine Breillat. Breillat. Um,
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 I can't remember her name now.
okay, yeah, I actually met Ellen Robbe-Gray, and he did a was I was an undergrad at UC Davis, and we there was just a very because I was a comparative literature major with French and English and German, and
Same, same here.
okay, okay, cool. I didn't know that. That's amazing. And so there was a Rob Grillet was a visiting author at my alma mater, and in the comparative literature department. And so there was a announcement. I guess I don't, you know in the department. It was just like a Xerox or whatever, and I saw it on the bulletin board. I was like, Alan Rubgray is going to be doing, live commentary on, uh, L'année dernière à Marienbad. And I was, oh my gosh, my heart, my heart, because this is my favorite film of all time.
But you know that, of course, Rob Grier and his wife were very much at the center for many, many years of the Paris BDSM scene.
I did not know that, but it does not
Oh,
surprise me.
very much so, yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Other,
obviously, because obviously of being bilingual and having obviously so many contacts in France. And I actually did with my French publisher, we did an anthology for Running Press with the awful title Ooh La La of of French female erotica, which did very, very well. So we had obviously a lot of the best French writers in there, including Roguier's wife and many others. Some of them are still writing. And but in fact, with my publishing hat on, I'm publishing an incredible French novel in March of next year by a young French writer called La Maison. Her
La
name is
Maison.
Emma Becker. I translated her first book 6, 7 years ago, which was really excellent. But now, now that I'm back in publishing with Bedford Square, I have my own list, and that's one of the first books I've acquired. Well, I've acquired another 20 since, which are all beginning to come out. But this one had to be translated, and I didn't feel I was the right person to translate it. So, and it's a story. I mean, she's very much a French auto fiction writer. Her first book was written when she was 19 and
Ah,
published when she was 22 and was called Monsieur, and was a story basically of the affair she had when she was 18 and 19 with a medical surgeon who was a friend of her family's who was in his mid 50s. And all her books have been auto fictions. Then 2 books later, basically, her books were doing okay, but she couldn't make a living. So she went to live in Berlin because, in fact, her grandmother was German and was basically writing and waitressing in Berlin and Mickey, but didn't know what she was going to write next. And suddenly had this idea that she would go and work in a brothel.
oh,
Because brothels, or they were 10 years ago, are still legal in Germany. So she worked in a brothel for 2 years, and she's written a book about her 18 or 24 months in the brothel, and it's an incredible book. It's incredibly erotic, but it's not so much about the sex. It's also about the portraits of all the women and the interactions between the women. She was more interested in the women rather than the customers. And Emma has become, obviously, our translator. Her first book has become a very close friend. And when I was offered the opportunity to edit and publish again 2 years ago, that was one of the first books I acquired. So we're publishing in the UK in March. We're hoping to sell US rights, but we're waiting obviously for the PDF to go out to the various American publishers who are
Right.
interested. So that's also, I mean, a wonderfully erotic book. There were lots of wonderful French authors. I mean, in France, to this day, erotica is still, I think, appreciated better than it is in the UK. And the same in Italy, because I did a book called, here again, obviously, one has to be pragmatic and you have to sell the book. I did an Italian version of erotica by Italian female authors, and it's called La Dolce Vita. That was also done by Running Press in America.
Oh,
And
right. Yeah.
they're still available, they're still ticking over. But oddly enough, the French one, Ooh La La, was a best-selling book for 18 months in a row, every single month, in the Amsterdam Airport Schiphol bookshop.
Oh my gosh.
Go figure.
Wow. Hmm. That's amazing. I'm really fascinated by erotica. I just, especially being a, U.S. citizen, and we have this appallingly retrograde, moribund kind of attitude towards anything involving pleasure. I mean, it's so backwards. We're so backwards, and I'm horrified by Puritanism, and never really understood it. And um but so let's talk about Manhattan Murder Ballad. So this is the third in a trilogy, and
So
kind of
second,
it's the second in a trilogy, pardon me.
it's
And
not
so
it's not going to be a trilogy. It's
it's
what I would call a diptych.
okay.
The first one was Just a Girl with a Gun, and this is the second half, so to
Oh, the
speak.
second half.
There,
Okay.
there will not be a third.
Okay. So tell me about Manhattan Murder Ballad.
Basically, in quite a lot of my short stories and two earlier novels, including one which was called Confessions of a Romantic Pornographer, I had this character called Cornelia, which is a homage to one of my all-time favorite writers, Cornell Woolrich. And she's a hit woman who also works as a stripper, but when she's also a book collector, so you'll see all the personal elements converge. She's also a huge book collector, and whenever basically a dealer gets in touch with her saying, "Oh, this book you wanted is now on the market," and this is a price, obviously, she can't pay for it through her stripping, so she takes on hit jobs. So every hit job basically ends up in a book. And I mentioned the books, many of which are books which I actually have in my collection. So there's a lot of Easter eggs and private jokes in there. But Cornelia appeared in quite a few books, in two novels and about, I think, two, three short stories. And I just loved her character. She's very cold-blooded. She's highly educated, but as I said, she works as a stripper, but also functions as a hit woman. And I thought, I mean, I was at odds of what to write. And I thought, let's bring Cornelia back for one last time. It was her last hurrah, so to speak.
Mm, yeah.
And that was Just a Girl with a Gun. And then I had other minor characters, including another killer, a hitman called Hopley, again named after Cornell Woolrich, because Cornell Woolrich's real name was George Hopley Woolrich. And um, and I thought, well, I know spoilers, but obviously um, Cornelia's itinerary came to an end at the end of Just a Girl with a Gun, so I couldn't bring her back. And when I came to writing this year's book, which I do I sit down every December, think, what am I going to write next? And I write it usually January, February, March. And all my books are first draft. There's never been a second draft. I'm an editor, so I edit as I go along, and I do write very quickly. And every year for the last 4 years since I lost my wife, I've been going on cruises because
I'm
it's like,
sorry.
it's like being on a hotel at
Yeah.
sea. And nobody's interrupting him. My agent isn't interrupting me, or the publishers. I can still do the occasional Zoom meeting even on a ship.
Yeah.
And so I've been writing like an annual book. And right now I'm sort of sitting here writing, jotting down little notes. What could I do next year if I stick to, for the fifth year in running, to doing a book this winter? So, and I'd written something in between. I'd written a sort of fantasy book called the Exopotamia Manuscript, which is a novella in between. And I thought, well, I'd like to go back to the world I created in just a girl with a gun, which is an America which is both mythical and current. There are never any cell phones in my books, so I don't want people to think, oh, this is 2020. It could be, it's more likely to be 1980 or 1990, although there are probably contradictions here and there. So I wanted to write this time a book about the New York I knew in when I started visiting New York, in fact, on publishing duties, when Times Square was seedy, and I wanted to combine it with some of the elements of Just a Girl of a Gun, in which I created a sort of a mysterious organization called the Bureau, for which my hitmen and hitwomen worked. And I'm also obviously greatly influenced by cinema, and I absolutely adore some of the Robert Altman and Alan Rudolph films of the 70s and 80s. Remember Me, Trouble in Mind. And I wanted to bring back that particular mood. So I was also, of course, I was the publisher of Horace McCoy's They Shoot Horses, Don't They, during my publishing career. And that's a book that's also stayed with me, obviously, and also the Cornette Woolrich stories with taxi dancers who you pay, you get a ticket and you have a dance, and the dance marathons of the Depression years. So I wanted to make that come alive again. In a semi-contemporary setting, and that's basically, and I couldn't bring back Cornelia, but I brought back very momentarily, I brought Hopley back, and obviously created some new characters, including a character who is in fact me, because he is an author.
Oh my gosh.
There are so many personal elements in there, and so it's basically, I wouldn't say an idealized me, but a very imperfect me. And I won't say what is true and what isn't true.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Who becomes like drawn into, weaved into a spider's web of intrigue with a new hit woman called Meg, whom he meets on a nude beach in Spain. And so it is fairly explicit, it is fairly erotic, it's also fairly violent. And it just brings basically that whole world to its conclusion over two fairly short novels. I mean, the novels are only 70 to 75,000 words each. And I mean, as I get older, somehow my books are getting shorter. I mean,
Mm.
last year, the Exopotamia manuscript was said ended up only being a novella and was only, I think, 29,000 words. And my Nicole Kidman novel, because every time I look at the novel, all I can think of is had Nicole Kidman filmed it. And
Yeah.
there's a wonderful scene towards the beginning of Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut, uh, where Kidman obviously is doing her makeup in front of a mirror, and her husband, played by Tom Cruise, is there, and she walks away towards, I think, another room in the nude, and she has this incredible backside. And every time I think of of that particular book, all I can see is Nicole Kidman's backside.
Right. Yes. 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 Truly, truly a work of art. Yes. Definitely. So I was just thinking, you've referenced the fact that you have two sides. I mean, you have the pragmatic side, and like very crudely, we could, say left brain, right brain, right? You've been a manager of huge organizations, and you're also as a private person, and very much of, love women as do. I mean, I don't know anybody who doesn't love women. except for some creeps. And also as do I. I mean, I've published, I've written a lot of books and short stories featuring this character called Candy Fontaine's slutty detective. And she's a detective, but she's also pretty much like a stripper and a hit man and a lot of other things. It's uncanny when you're talking about your character. I was thinking, wow, that sounds a lot like Candy Fontaine, you know. But
Mine appeared for the first time about 20 years ago.
okay, yes, wow. So, and actually, the name, which Ken Goffman, aka Are You Serious, reminded me when I had him on the show more recently, is that the name Slutty Detective actually comes from a Kathy Acker novel, which I think I just pocketed that away. Empire of the Senseless. I just put that away when I read I was a slutty detective in a city of mirrors, and Ken said. That's a Kathy Acker line. I was like, oh yeah. So when you're writing um these characters and you also write autofiction, which is a fascinating genre and up and coming genre, I think. Um how does the sort of the left hand side play into the right hand side, if that makes any sense?
It doesn't. I have to separate them.
Oh,
As I said,
okay, okay.
I'm fully aware when I'm writing fiction that I'm writing for a much smaller audience.
Right.
I mean, I can write for a large audience, and I have done so. 6 months before 50 Shades of Grey came out, uh, my agent began getting calls from publishers saying, would I be interested in writing something particular? And got in touch with me, and I said, not really. And then my agent convinced me, and I was sent, this was long before it was published, I was sent a sort of samizdat copy of the first volume, which I could barely complete the first chapter. It was like so badly written. It was an insult to writing, it was an insult to erotica, and it was an insult to BDSM, which I know, which I'm not a huge, I've never been a huge, my interest in sex or erotica somehow has never leaned into BDSM but I know a lot of people in the BDSM world, and I have observed, albeit not really participated in the BDSM world, and it was an insult to BDSM. And then my agent said, well, they're really very keen. Obviously, they all came in touch saying, oh, we know we objected when Maxim had all these sex scenes. Well, could he now do a book with just the sex scenes? But I came up with, obviously, a two-page outline, and it just went mad. And we had like people bidding against each other, and the advances that my agent was offered were absolutely, I mean, it was a Godfather situation, offers you couldn't refuse.
Right.
In the 2 years that followed publication of 50 Shades of Grey, I wrote 10 105,000 word novels in 18 months
Oh my gosh.
under a female pen name because that's what
Yeah.
the markets and the wholesalers insisted on, which were number two in all the bestseller lists for nearly 2 years, and which were number two to all the 50 Shades of Grey books. These were the more literate, it was like a more literate version, and also much more true to life.
Yeah.
And we ended up selling 6 million copies, and the books have sold in 31 languages. So that was my next pension fund.
Wow, incredible. Yeah. That's really
But
beautiful thing.
I mean, I had to sign a disclosure that I will never remember which name. But if you
Yeah.
go back on they never did well in America. In America, they flopped. But in
Wow.
Germany, we were number two to 50 Shades. In England, we were number four after the three 50 Shades novels. And I
Right.
said, sold and sold and sold. And my publisher in Turkey actually went to prison for 1 week.
Oh
As a
my
result,
gosh.
he got fined uh, for absolutely, well. because he hadn't read the books carefully enough. I mean,
Right.
sellers in England say he was publishing them without reading them.
Yeah. Wow.
And the Turkish authorities took umbrage to a particular scene. So no, and those were written. Although I still stand by the books, I think they are well written. They are credible characters, and yes, the sex is very realistic, and the BDSM is realistic. It was quite amusing that when the books came out, as any author does, after a week or so, I went onto Amazon to see if there were any reviews, and in the week following publication of the first volume in the series, there are 10 volumes in the series. Um, Basically, there are all these 0-star reviews saying, this is not like 50 Shades. This is disgusting.
This is disgusting, right?
And then within a week, our readership arrived. And after getting our 5-star reviews of people who said, oh, actually, this is rather well written. And
Right.
actually, I actually believe in these characters.
Right. Yes.
And the places they go to. Because I set the book, obviously, the series. I mean, I couldn't keep them in London. I had them traveling all over the world, including in my favorite place. There's one whole volume that takes place in New Orleans, which is
Oh,
another.
yeah.
And several of my novels and short stories take place in New Orleans. And one of my, two of my greatest, two of the things I'm most proud of in Vanity Vanity is I'm very friendly with a crime writer in New Orleans called O'Neill Deneau, who's become a good friend. I mean, when I was still going there 2 or 3 times a year when my wife was alive, we would always spend Christmas and New Year in New Orleans. Um, Now that I'm on my own, I haven't been for a few years now, but we would always go out with O'Neill and his wife was an editor. And one year, Deb, O'Neill's wife, was asked by a local publisher, was it Pontalba Press, a local New Orleans publisher, uh, would you like to do a book of short stories all set in New Orleans called New Orleans Noir? No, sorry, Erotic New Orleans. Sorry, I'm getting my noir and my
Yeah.
erotica. So Deb edited a book called Erotic New Orleans, and I'm so proud I am the only non-New Orleans native in it.
Fascinating.
And then the other one was, I think it was around Christmas or New Year one year, we were having dinner, the four of us, at a lovely place on stilts just off Lake Pontchartrain. This was before Katrina because the restaurant was washed away during Katrina, and our wives had gone to the powder room, and O'Neill, and this is obviously he'd already retired from the police by now, but he then moved on to become head of security at Tulane University. And O'Neill leaned over to me and asked, I read that story you published in this volume somewhere. I can't remember where I published it. And he said, you mentioned this club in New Orleans where all these rather unsavory things happen. You know that when I was in the police, and I mentioned where it was more or less geographically in a particular segment of the French Quarter in New Orleans. And he said, when I was in the NOPD, we always heard about this club, but we could never find it. And I said, really? I'd invented this club completely,
Oh my gosh.
situated in an area that I thought would make sense. It was like reality and fiction coming together. So,
Yeah.
which is basically to say that I do take my erotica seriously, and I try to make it realistic in terms of the places, the characters, the things people do. And I mean, obviously, it has been criticized as any erotica has and will always be. But I really stand by it. And I do believe, I mean, it's a bit like Sturgeon's law, which he applied to science fiction, that 90% of everything is rubbish. But as long as you go into the remaining 10%, the 10% of good erotica, will stand with any mainstream novel.
That's yeah, I mean I love those genres and especially I just for the first time I watched a basic I'm still in the process of watching Basic Instinct 2 and I'm blown away about by how intelligent it is, how well written it is. I mean, it gets into Lacan, it gets into Freudian analysis. You know, this is a very, very good film. And I don't know if you've seen it or
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
yes, and so
But I mean, Verhoeven, the director, obviously, if you see
yes,
some other films, there is that streak that goes throughout all the films, whether the films he made in Holland or the films he's done in France since, or the films he made in America.
yeah, I'm referring to the sequel, Basic Instinct 2, which is just a marvelous film, and the character, and I don't know why you know, because okay, so I'm, you know, as I said, I have this long-standing character, Candy Fontaine, slutty detective, and she is a very, very much of a femme fatale and also a protagonist. So she's a bad guy and a good guy in one. Well, much like your character in the in that not a trilogy, but the what do you call it, diptych or yeah.
Duology.
And I was just thinking, I'm sort of trying to kind of extract a question that makes sense. So going back to the whole notion that you were, you know, manager of larger organizations, you had very, very, you know, great responsibilities. Um, but at the same time, you know, somebody, a character like your character in the it was just a girl, right? The first one, um, you know, that mentality, that being sort of a responsible for, you know, when you're a corporate manager, you have to make decisions that are sometimes greatly unpleasant and sometimes, you know, it's not personal, but you have to, you know, fire people, you have to get rid of people, whatever. It can feel very, I'm sure, um, very disheartening, you know. And I don't know, maybe I'm just sort of talking about myself, but does that kind of, you know, that you see what I'm saying, right? That the mentality you need to have to manage people, that must play a part in your creation of these femme fatale characters to a certain extent because they have to, I mean, being a hit person, a hit man or whatever, that's strategy and you know, it's business, it's strategy, it's pleasure too. I'm sorry, you know, I went there, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, yes. I mean, there is a left-hand side and a right-hand side to me, but also to the characters. I mean,
Yeah,
Cornelia obviously is highly educated, but she has a cold heart. She can kill without compunction, but she's also aware of the fact that she's cold-hearted.
right.
She's aware that there is a void inside her, and that's basically what brought her to this level. And obviously, eventually, in Just a Girl with a Gun, after the whole novel and obviously the short stories and her appearances in a couple of my novels, basically she is on a she is aware that she's on the road to nowhere and that the end will inevitably come. So there's also this acceptance that nothing she can do is ever going to change it, and which is something I think that possibly is problematic with a lot of my characters because a lot of my characters are like that. Probably
Yeah,
because I am too.
right. Yeah,
I am I am a pessimist at heart.
yeah,
Uh, uh, and in terms, obviously, of the pragmatic maxim and obviously the creative maxim, I mean, I think that goes back straight back to obviously having had parents who were both totally opposite. I mean, my father left Poland when he was in his late teens to walk all the way to Spain to fight in the international brigades. He was a man of action and later became a very successful businessman. Obviously, he started off as a die-hard communist and ended up as a rather rich capitalist, which was also instructive for me and means that I'm a totally non-political person. Obviously, I know I have opinions and I have views, but I never make them public because I just feel that basically there's just no point that
Yeah.
a political opinion or stating what my political opinions are is not going to change anything in the state of the world's
Yeah.
sad. And my mother obviously was a left-wing intellectual. That's how they met, because my father was wounded during the Spanish Civil War and evacuated back to the UK, where the UK authorities said, "Okay, we'll send you back to Poland." And then Hitler invaded Poland the day before his ship was ready to set sail for Poland. And so I was born basically of a communist man of action and a left-wing intellectual journalist. So
Interesting.
that's probably
Yeah.
ref that's probably reflecting in my dual sort
Yeah.
of personality, maybe. But I try not to think about it. I'd rather write about it and basically learn about it through writing rather than think about it.
Right. Yeah. Well, it reminds me of something I think was attributed to Jim Morrison, or maybe he called, dubbed himself an erotic politician, you know, that maybe the two, you know, genres, if you will, of life correspond in the field of action, where you're fucking somebody or you're wanting to murder somebody or have a contract. Yeah, I went there because this is really fascinating. I mean, one of my earliest interviews that I did way back in the day was with Lucy Taylor, and we were talking about like that, the
I
sort
pub
of
I published The Safety of Unknown Cities was a book I published.
You were the guy. Oh, wow. So you were the guy. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I love Lucy Taylor. In fact, I commissioned a story for by her, which was called Extremo Files, which was published in the 2015 anthology Axis of Evil, a heavy metal horror anthology. And it is a thing of beauty. And I'm republishing with her permission in my forthcoming Clive Barker tribute. So I love Lucy Taylor. I mean, she is one of the best there is, right?
Incredible writer. She
Yeah.
was, say, when I met her for the first time, I mean, that was what, 30 years ago. She was absolutely beautiful. Unfortunately, she was with someone and I was married.
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah. Wow.
But it was very much lust at first sight
Oh
from
my gosh.
my side.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
As a result of which, it was also an utter pleasure when I read The Safety of Unknown Cities. I said, I want to publish it.
Yeah, that's incredible. I had no idea you were the publisher because I
Well,
actually I
it
actually
came
have
out,
the
it
go
came out
ahead.
first as a limited edition
Yeah, I have that
hardcover
one.
in America, but the mass market edition. I mean, I had a copy of it, and I said no, it needs a bigger audience. So
Yeah.
I in a mass market, well, trade paperback version.
Yeah. That is a stunning novel, and I remember I reviewed it for I think Necro publication or Death Realm. I was so struck by the themes of sex addiction as metaphor and the very Burroughsian kind of elements, the corpse fuckers, the shit eaters, then and I talked to Lucy about how those we talked about something very interesting that she said for years she'd been toying with the idea of a story about a woman who is kind of erotically obsessed with being murdered. And I just realized that the story that I wrote for Thomas Roche in Noir Erotica 3 um, Hollywood Black is that story that Lucy Taylor didn't write, you know? So it's kind of fascinating how these have you had that experience where you know somebody suggests something or you come up with something, you forget about it for, you know, decades later and you write the thing?
Hmm. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't.
I was also thinking of, you know, in terms of like great women, you know, writers of noir or erotic crime or, you know, Krista Faust, right? You know, she was introduced to me by Craig Spector, and then I introduced her to Thomas Roche. So that's why she's in one of his anthologies. I don't think it was, it may have been the first noir erotica anthology that she was in. But yeah, I mean, she is one of my favorites, you know, as
Mhm.
far as that.
Read
And
her, I've read her hard case crime novels, which are they're good novels, but
yeah,
I mean they're a little bit derivative. I find them
okay, that's fair. I mean,
as,
it,
as if she was self-censoring herself a bit.
right,
But
yeah,
I know that Charles, who runs obviously hard case crime, is not into allowing much explicitness in the books.
okay. Of all the, so I love, I mean, I'm fascinated by, you know, erotica by women because it's sort of like horror. And we were talking about Lucy Taylor and then, you know, then Poppy Z. Brite and Nancy Kilpatrick, who was um a good friend of mine and a collaborator with me. So as far as women who write in these sort of multi genres of, you know, specifically like erotica, noir, crime, who are some of your favorite women writers in that area?
Well, certainly Lucy. I can't really think of many. Obviously, there's Pam Rosenthal. Obviously, wrote under. I can't remember. She wrote three novels under a pen name. I'm trying to remember the pen name now, unfortunately. Wrote three really excellent novels. There's also another American writer who came and went, called Laura Reese. Wrote
Okay,
a book called Topping from Below,
I've heard of
which
that.
and then followed up on it. But um, unfortunately, I mean, there's never been much of a market uh, for that sort of erotica. Not many publishers were open to it. So as a result, I think a lot of books that could have been written have not been written. And a lot of those authors have stuck to basically writing short stories or moved into other genres.
Right.
Um, I'm trying to think. There was well, I mean, she's still alive, although she doesn't seem to be writing fiction these days. There was a writer called Alice Joannou.
I was about to mention her. Yeah.
In fact, I just got an email from her yesterday. When we still, I commissioned her first novel. I mean, she'd been published by Richard Casack at
Right.
one of,
Yes.
but only short stories. And I'd commissioned a novel when I was running a small imprint for a friend of mine who wanted me to do. We did about 12 books, and Lucy's one of them. And I did a book called Alice 69
Hmm.
and I thought Alice. I mean, her short stories are wonderful, but she couldn't really repeat it at novel length. I mean, it was brilliant, but she couldn't really structure a novel sufficiently. And now she's mostly writing nonfiction and comic strips. And she's the sister-in-law of the screenwriter and film director Scott Franks, who did Get Shorty and many other classic noir things. So there is noir in the family, so to speak.
Wait a minute. So Scott Franks is actually a character in Basic Instinct 2. So that's an Easter egg, right?
Yes, indeed.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Wow. Yeah.
When you look at Scott Frank's filmography, both obviously screenplays and directing, I mean, two-thirds of them are all noir.
Yeah. Yeah. What is it about that, kind of it really it goes way beyond the intellect, I think. Um about erotic noir. What is it that does it for you? What turns you on about it?
Well, it's the sense of basically of taboo, of breaking taboos.
Yeah.
I mean, I enjoy, but I'm less, I wouldn't say comfortable, but I'm less enthusiastic about what one would term, and it is becoming very fashionable, and I know that with my publishing hat on right now, is basically what I would term body horror.
Right.
There are writers in body horror, but for me, it hasn't got the same appeal. I'd rather have a sex than a horror.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, that's something that yeah, so sex and horror, and as I put it to Lucy many years ago, is sort of like I questioned that. I said, kind of playing devil's advocate, well, what is the connection between sex and death? And she said, well, it's profound, right? And it's like what Georges Bataille, I think it was, believe it was Bataille, called a limit experience, or was that Bataille? um that and obviously Le Petite Mort, you're and then Datlow did a book called Little Deaths, right? It's sort of like it's hard to explain how how all these themes and all these threads kind of produce magic on the page. But and again, being a US person, it's always vastly baffled me why we're so in denial about the body, right? I mean, what is your experience of like American publishers and American authors, aside from, I mean, the wonderful Lucy Taylor et al., and Mitzi Soreto, who's also a friend, and then European writers and publishers in terms of like explicit hardcore erotica.
I mean, unfortunately, there was what with 50 Shades of Grey, there was a tsunami of terrible erotica. And if I might say, obviously, my own 10 books, which were slightly better, I hope. And that lasted about 2 years. And since then, no major publisher will touch erotica. Purely, I mean, the shops won't take it, the
Yeah,
chain won't take it, so therefore the publishers are not taking it. I mean, right now, erotica is a dirty word in terms of what I would term general trade publishing, which,
fascinating.
which I find extremely sad. But
Yeah. It's just so in general, I mean, just in general in the industry, right? It's a dirty word.
um, it's not so much a dirty word, but it's just something that publishers are just feel that. I mean, publishers are like lemmings. When something big, they all follow.
Yeah,
One of the reasons why some years ago I finally gave up on publishing and decided to write full time and or live on my pensions, my various pension funds, which I'd accumulated through writing and other means. And then said 2 years ago to very respected UK publishers, used to be on the board of the Hachette Group, who own Little Brown, etc.
wow.
Finally left after decades in a corporate environment to set up a new publishing house, a new independent publishing house. And I was contacted and asked, did I want to come back on
Yeah,
board? And obviously, I had a number of conditions, and which they were quite happy to respect. And I'm now editing, as I said, for Bedford Square No Exit Press.
yeah.
This is purely crime, but I'm doing a lot of non-crime for Bedford Square. In fact, I've somehow also, I mean, purely it's been totally fortuitous. I've been looking at our spring list because the catalogue just came in. Our three lead titles are all what I would term women's interest books, and
Interesting.
they were all acquired by me, although all the other editors in the company are female.
Right.
Very odd. Um, Although one of them was also another of these strange coincidences. Because of my publishing activity, obviously, I also have some activity. I ran London's Mystery Film Festival for 15 years, so I have a lot of contacts in films.
Yeah.
I will never write for films, but I love movies. I've curated a number of seasons at the National Film Theatre in London. I did a 35 film season of road movies, which I was very pleased to do. And I've done seasons on certain directors, and I've done some rewrites on certain films. And I've been friendly for 20, 25 years with the British film director Stephen Frears,
Wow.
whom I met when he was working on The Grifters, because I was Jim Thompson's publisher and I published The Grifters. So that's how I met Stephen at a film festival, because I've been on the committee of various film festivals.
Yeah.
And then my daughter has lived in America for 20 years now. She's a big cheese in the advertising world, and she lives in New York. And because of they had common friends at university, uh, their she and her husband's best friends in America are Stephen Frears' son and his wife
Oh my gosh.
is the ex-fashion editor of New York magazine. So I've never actually met her yet somehow, because we've always never been in the same place at the same time, even though my daughter's family and her family spent every fortnight together at their house in on Long Island.
Yeah.
And we're spending Thanksgiving together. I think is it next week or the week after next. And Amy, who is the daughter-in-law of Stephen Frears, wrote a book last year, and
Oh my gosh.
I heard about it from my daughter. I said, "Well, let me have a look at it," and I'm publishing the book.
Oh, congratulations. That's
We're having a
awesome.
big party in January where I will finally meet her, because she's been over to the UK twice since, but
Yeah.
I haven't been in the country. And obviously Stephen will be coming, so it'll be the first time that I'll see both sides of the family.
That's beautiful. That's
And our
beautiful.
my grandchildren and Amy and Will Frears' children are best friends. They're together all the time.
That's amazing. I'm
Will
a
Frears, one of these odd. I mean, the way things it's just the way things work.
Yeah, I mean, as I was thinking, speaking of film and the UK and such, I'm a close friend of Anna Taborska, and just a tragedy that I hope very much to meet her one day, in person. But um, you're fortunate being in London, right? So you could see Anna. Yes, and she's
I mean,
also in.
I'm in the US quite often.
Yeah. I would I
Although
would.
very almost never in California. I'm not a
Well,
great California.
okay. Okay, that's okay. That's okay. I mean, I just hope like
I was
please because
invited. I was invited 2 years ago
yeah.
to go to a festival in Palm Springs.
Oh wow.
I was planning to go, and when I realized that my ESTA visa, which I've been having for 20 years and I
Yeah.
keep on renewed every 18 months, had to be renewed, so I tried to renew it, and when I was turned down,
Oh my gosh.
it found out that I was a guest at a literary festival in Cuba.
Oh
So
wow.
took me 6 months. I had to reapply for a different type of visa, which cost a lot more, and I had to be interviewed twice by American authorities. And I now have my American visa, and it's valid for 10 years. But otherwise, I would have gone to Palm Springs.
Yeah, I mean for an apolitical person or certainly somebody who's not public with your politics, that was held against you.
I mean, they found out I was in Cuba. I was in Cuba for 48 hours.
Right.
Even
Okay.
though
Incredible.
the Cubans never stamped my passport.
Right.
But somehow the US authorities found out and wouldn't grant me the visa I'd had for the last 20 years. But I
So,
said, that's now all been resolved. I was interviewed at the American consulate in London, explained everything, and they said, yes, no, that's okay. I mean, the fact that my grandchildren are American,
right. That's it.
you know,
That's
both,
amazing.
both parents are English, but they've lived
Yeah.
in America for over 20 years now.
Yeah. So Stephen Frears did that film with about Joe Orton, right? The
Yes, yeah.
yeah, yeah. I forget with who was in that film. It's one of my
Gary,
favorite.
Gary Oldman.
Yes.
Gary
Yes.
Oldman and what's his name? He was also in the Gamache TV series. He's got a slightly Spanish name. I'm forgetting his name now, but no, Gary Oldman was in the Joe Orton film.
Yeah, I am absolutely fascinated with that case, and I know that Billy Martin is too. In fact, he wrote a story called Meeting Mr. Orton, right? And one of his collections. Yeah, so yeah. Speaking of Billy Martin, so I am working on a little not that this is going to help, but it's an anthology called Exquisite Corpus, a literary tribute to Poppy Zebright, and I would love to have something from you if you know if you're so moved. It's a kind of a I don't like the term charity, but it is to benefit, Gray and Billy. So if you're so moved, I would love a contribution.
I'll have to think about it because right now, I mean, I haven't written a short story. I usually write my short stories. I finish my novel usually around Easter,
Yeah.
and I usually write two or three short stories,
Uh,
Easter
yeah.
and summer.
It,
And I
it,
mean,
it,
I must admit, I feel totally empty of ideas.
no, I mean it could be nonfiction. It could be just like a you know 2,000 words or so, just like
Oddly enough, I've never met Poppy.
okay,
It-
yeah,
Even though I've spent probably months on end, if you put them all together in New Orleans over the last 20 years,
right,
with somehow.
yeah, but yeah, okay. So just something to keep in mind.
I'll bear it in mind, but
Yeah, that's no
right now,
worries.
who knows?
Okay, cool. Yeah, okay. So I think I mean we could, there's a lot of things that we could talk about, but I know that you're probably eager to get back to your work, and I am too. And this has been absolutely fascinating. It's thrilling to meet you, and it's a real pleasure and an honor. So I am working. I apologize for the delay in getting you your contributor's copy of the Junk Merchants Director's Cut because it is nearly 800 pages. And I found some errors that were committed by me and some by other people. And so I'm just kind of like correcting the text. And then, probably within no longer than 2 weeks, I'll send you your copy. So really, really appreciate it. Your story, Olympia Express, was like I said, it was my motivation for putting it out in print. And I just thought, well, Dean did a fabulous job on the first Junk Merchants, and he certainly did his best with the little stub of the Junk Merchants too. But I thought, well, Maxim's story by itself was so magnificent. I need to grow an entire orchard around it, to put it so like a sapphire, in a I needed a gem setting, right? So that's the book.
Interestingly enough, I mean, that particular story came, there is a guy he lives on an island off Vancouver called Rick McGrath,
Hmm.
a journalist, in fact, ex-music journalist. He did a lot of music journalism in the 80s and 90s and then went into advertising and made made a lot of money and then sold his company and has now been retired for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
He also happens to be, or happened to be, the greatest J.G. Ballard collector.
Oh,
He
wow.
has this collection of Ballard papers, manuscripts, books in every single language, interviews. He's now donated it, obviously, to university. But for the last 15 years, he created a small publishing house called Terminal Press, of course, named after the Terminal Beach story.
Right.
And he started 10 years ago doing an annual book called The Deep End, which is basically all about Ballard. And I had written one or two little non-fiction features for him, and then I'd run out of what to do when the next year came up. And I thought, I have a story which is true of smuggling the Olympia Press uh, editions of Burroughs in my luggage when I came back to London from being in Paris, because Mike had asked me on behalf of Jimmy. And but I thought that's a 1,000 word little piece, a bit of memorabilia, and I thought, well, no, maybe I'll write it as fiction, and then
Yeah.
started in, and it just went well, and it was initially published in Deep Ends,
Oh, wow.
and I because I don't know how Dean got hold of it. I think Dean probably saw that copy of Deep Ends because Deep Ends is a large format. In fact, I've got some here. Hold on, 2 seconds. Uh, yeah, I mean that's the 2022. There was like an annual one, and it's all heavily heavily illustrated throughout. Uh, And so Olympiabex was published in there for the first time.
Oh, I see.
And
Okay.
with the illustration, he dummied up a page. The title page was like an old Olympia book
Oh,
with a green,
wow.
really.
Beautiful.
And
That's
then
be
I think that's what the story Dean might have. That's, I think that's the only place Dean could have found it.
okay. Okay.
And then
Because
I collected it 4 years ago in my, every 4 or 5 years, I do a collection of all my short stories. And so it was collected in Death Has a Thousand Faces,
okay. So I will. So what is the name of the initial publication so I can correct it in the text?
or Deep Ends,
Deep Ends.
Deep
Uh,
Ends,
Deep Ends. Okay. So I will correct that in the text, I'm very glad that you said that because
Terminal
be,
Press,
yes. I'm sorry. What was the press?
Terminal Press.
Terminal Press, that's right. It's in Terminal Beach. So yeah, because my arrangements with Dean have been very murky and mysterious, and so that's why I republished the Junk Merchants, the first Junk Merchants one, and I had Poppy Billy Martin do the introduction, and then finally I decided, well, this needs by the time that I had finished my soliciting for other Brosiana, I had so many stories and poems that I decided we're going to put out the definitive volume. So it's good that I never knew that it where it originally came from. So that's great that I now know, so I can add that to the text because I'm very kind of compulsive about being correct. I want to give credit to the publisher, original publisher, and it's provenance. So really appreciate that. So is there anything we have not covered that you would like to talk about? Hitchcock, right? Hitchcock. So tell me about the Hitchcock anthology.
Well, basically, I mean, I have slowed down on anthologies, and basically, Titan Books is owned by two very good friends, and for years, they'd been, I wouldn't say pestering me, but trying to convince me to do some books for them. And then I thought I want to do a Cornell Woolwich. I mean, what happened is that I'd been watching the American small press scene, and over the last decade, two or three small press publishers in America, because of obviously of print on demand, and been doing a lot of anthologies. I think it started with a Bruce Springsteen anthology of stories inspired by the music or the songs of artist X or Y or Z.
Uh-huh.
And I think Springsteen was the very first one, and then it started expanding at an exponential rate. I mean, God, I think there have been about 20 or 25 over the last 4 or 5 years. Some of them on groups or musicians. I would never even thought justified inspiring 20 new short stories. I mean, there's been a Jimmy Buffett, there's been a Billy Joel, there's been an Aerosmith, there's even been a Guided by Voices, which that I understand.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and in fact, I mean, it's now gone dry because the main publisher who'd done half of them went out of business just 2 months ago, Down and Out Books. And but I thought it was an interesting idea. I mean, I did one for was it Sandra Murphy? She wanted hits of the 1980s, and I did my Eleanor Rigby
Oh,
story.
nice. Yeah.
There had been a Beatles volume, but it's a song which I mean, you talk about autofiction, which not only is a song a beautiful remains a beautiful song, but it is strongly associated with something that happened to me the summer it was released, when it was constantly on the radio. So I wrote a story for that one, and that's the only one I did. All that I was asked for because obviously people knew of my connection with the music scene, so a lot of people had asked, but that was the only one. And then said Titan were trying to convince me to do something for them, and I thought, oh, I'll do Cornell Woolwich because they're heavily, obviously, they do a lot of film books too. So I convinced them to do Woolwich. And I did a collection called Dark as the Night, where I've got obviously a lot of people, including Neil Gaiman, who at the time was a good friend of mine
Oh,
until obviously
wow.
what happened, obviously, on the cover of the paperback. We've had to take him off the cover of the paperback. And lots of obviously well-known writers, mostly from the crime and thriller field. And that did reasonably well. And so they asked me, do you want to do a follow-up? And I said, yes. But this time I want to do J.G. Ballard because Jimmy was obviously a very, very close friend and obviously a major influence on my writing. Obviously, Crash, obviously, is also one of the great erotic novels. And that seems to have done reasonably well. And then they were asking me, so what do you want to do next? And I really didn't know. I mean, I didn't want to do Chandler. It was done in the 70s. Hammett has been done. So I couldn't think, obviously, of anybody that I was interested in because obviously you still need a name that obviously bookshops are familiar with. And then suddenly it came to me, Hitchcock. And so I submitted my proposal. And by an odd set of circumstances, it got lost within the publishing house with the owners not knowing. And my agent then decided after 4 weeks had gone by just to put it out on offer. And it went to Bedford Square, oddly enough. This was
Wow.
before I became editor at large for Bedford
Oh
Square.
my gosh.
So basically, the idea was to commission lots of crime and thriller writer and mainstream writers, and also film writers who are also known for writing fiction, each to write a new story inspired by either a Hitchcock movie, Hitchcock's persona in real life, or basically what makes suspense in Hitchcock. And Lee Child came in, which obviously helped. Obviously, selling it into bookshops, getting obviously Lee, who's a very. I published his his first story 25 years ago, so he's always been happy to write something for me, even though he's now retired. And I've got people like David Thompson who wrote the uh, was it the International Biography of Filmmaking, which is obviously one of the big reference books. I've got Ann Bilson, who's a major film critic, but also a novelist. And then crime writers like Peter Swanson in America, who's also heavily influenced by movies, and who came up with a wonderful story inspired by strangers on a train called Strangers on a School Bus.
Oh, nice.
It's absolutely wonderful, which he's since cannibalized the story into his new novel.
Nice.
And so, and then obviously, when Titan found out about it, were absolutely fuming. So why didn't your agent sell it to us? And I said, yes, she did. And they found out that there was a breakdown in communications in the house. So they bought the US rights.
Oh,
So the book
wow.
was published by Bedford Square in England, for whom I now work and which I partly own, because I've also become part owner of Bedford Square. And published by Titan in America. And right now we're selling the rights in various other countries. And then it was chosen by the Times as the thriller of the month and as one of the best thriller books of the year. So it's only been out 5, 6 weeks, but we know
Congratulations.
to get a good quantity into the shop. So hopefully it'll sell through with Christmas. And I've now signed a contract for the follow-up, which I won't reveal, but is also a film inspired book, which is now obviously I've only just started commissioning the stories, and that's scheduled for September 2027. So we're
Okay.
looking quite a long way ahead. But it is a film. It is film based like the Hitchcock.
Okay.
No, it's not a Martin Scorsese one, or or a Spielberg, or even a David Lynch, as some people tried to convince me to do. But unfortunately, it was done and by a
Yes.
small American press and very badly, sadly.
I think Chris Kelso did something about Cronenberg. I think, yeah. Yeah.
And he's also done a very interesting book for PS Publishing about Andrei Zulawski's Possession.
Oh, wow. I love that film. That's incredibly,
And in fact,
incredible.
Chris Kelso's book is very good because it's a sort of auto fiction
Yeah.
and
Oh, wow. Yeah.
and study of possession. It's quite long. It's nearly 180 pages.
Well, I need to read that. We actually almost wrote a book together many years ago about this. He has this fascination with puppets, right? And I came up with the idea of a okay, so it's a penal planet. It's sort of like if Kafka's In the Penal Colony was an entire planet, right? And there's these monstrous kind of puppets that are sort of like Wicker Man. So it's combining the Wicker Man um, concept with what if the Wicker Men were actually puppets that were sort of roving this planet that's a prison planet, and they fed on this kind of syrup, this sort of this kind of for like hummingbirds, that red syrup, whatever whatever it is, and it was just it's a concept that I played around with for years, and Chris now is, I mean, he's very, very busy with his family and his work as a teacher, right in Scotland, but um I finally, I think I managed to do the definitive version of Planet of, was it, I don't know even know what it's called, but it's had several titles, but it's basically about these the Wicker Man on that are puppets that move in this. Anyway, it's a concept, but Chris is a great guy, and I was really
I
I,
mean,
I
I've read stuff by him, but I don't know him personally.
I mean, I only know that I only, I published or republished his thing, his Burroughs thing in the first volume of the which I sent you, the kind of. tell stories from the junk merchants because there were so many. Yeah, I mean, I've known him for quite a while now. Um, and so yes, I think that kind of brings us to a close here. So what for my all five of my viewers, what are your how can people get in touch with you and what are your social media handles and venues?
I don't do much social media. I'm
You,
on
you
the only
yeah,
place is Facebook.
okay.
I've never been on Twitter or Sky, was it Sky Blue or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
The only place I go on is Facebook.
Facebook. Okay, so through Facebook.
And of course, there's my website, which obviously is sadly incomplete because I seldom put anything new on there.
Yeah, yeah.
It just happens to be there. But you were talking just before we finish. We were talking about, in fact, I mean, the waves of serendipity, as so to speak. You were
Yeah.
talking about at Bedford Square. I'm also publishing in March a horror book because we don't know we horror is a genre we don't do at Bedford Square. We stick to the areas we know well, and we don't know enough about horror. But
Yeah.
we're publishing a horror book which I acquired, which has come out. It came out in America a few years back, which I think is probably the best horror book about puppets ever written.
Oh
And
my gosh.
it's also a beautiful book. It's also a love story, and it's called The Motion of Puppets.
The motion of puppets.
And
Damn.
it's a mainstream Irish American author called Keith Donoghue. It was published by Farrar Straus and then Picador about 4 or 5 years ago, and came and went. And it's toys meets Stephen King
Yes.
meets love story, and it's wonderful,
I need to
absolutely.
read this thing. Oh my
And
God.
the other piece of serendipity is you mentioned obviously Wicker Men. Um, I go to Venice tomorrow for a literary festival. One of the pieces on the program I'm involved on a panel discussing Don't Look Now, Nicholas Roeg's film, which is one of my
Yes.
all-time favorite films. And when Don't Look Now was first released in the UK, it came out as a double bill because the producers didn't believe it could stand on its own. So they brought out with another film they didn't believe in. And it's quite legendary now that Don't Look Now came out in England on the same bill as a double movie as The Wicker Man
Oh my gosh.
all those years ago.
That's fascinating. Wow. Wow. Don't look now. And so Nicholas Rogue performance, right? I'm trying to think who
Bad,
did
bad timing.
Bad Timing with Art Garfunkel and what's the film that he made in Australia? Did he make Walkabout or was that
Walkabout was his second film as a
yeah,
director. The first one was the one with Jagger, and which he co-directed with Donald Cammell. Performance.
right. Who made the cars that ate Paris?
Peter Weir,
Peter Weir, that's the other one. Yeah.
and went on to do Picnic at Hanging Rock, the,
Yes.
the Mosquito Coast, Master and Commander.
Yes, yes. Very, very
Died.
incredible.
He retired from filming very, very early. Well, he's still alive.
Yeah. Did you know Tony Scott?
No, I mean
Okay.
I know not of him.
Okay. Yeah, I was just thinking because there's so many serendipities in and around like Ridley Scott and Tony Scott and my old friend Paul M. Salmon and Anna Taborsk and all these filmmakers and writers and horror and erotica crime and bizarro. It's a beautiful area to be in. There's not I mean for me, unlike you, I don't have really the business acumen, but I do have passion for what I do. So I'm really I thank you so much for this. It's been a delightful 2 hours or so. So
No problem. Anyway, lovely seeing you.
okay.
I'll go and pack my case for Venice now.
Okay. Take care, my friend.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.